What up, YouTube? What it do? We are back at MGM. Such a beautiful day. Gotta love it. Beautiful day to play poker, even though we're gonna be inside. But anyways, today it's gonna be a little bit different. I'm not just gonna show the highlight hands. Any hand that I decide to play, meaning if I'm in the big blind, check my option. If I raise to $10 and somebody 3-bets, I'm gonna show that too. If I limp into a pot, showing everything. It's gonna kind of show you what the full session really is when you're playing a session in poker. Most people already know, but this one's just gonna be more realistic. You're gonna see a little bit more folds, a lot of raising. Just bet one time, get folds. But anyways, let's get right to the felt. Appreciate y'all for the support. Let's get right in here and let's run this thing up. So in this very first hand, we looking down at a beautiful King 10 of clubs, my favorite suit, and we are 40% to a royal. We are on the button and we raised it up to 15 and only the cutoff decides to call. So we are on the way to a flop, which is ace 8-6 with 2 clubs. So obviously this is going to hit our range being an ace high board. And we also have a flush draw to back into in case we need it. So we bet out a bet of $12, but he folds and we take down the first hand. I'll take it. Few hands later, we see pocket jacks. There's a few limps, so we're going to raise it up to $20 from the small blind, but they all fold. So I'll take it. Nobody really wants to go multi-way with jacks, so not a bad result. Few shuffles later, we get dealt ace jack in the big blind. There's an under the gun limp, so when it gets to me, I'm going to raise my standard of $15, and he decides to call. Most people who limp under the gun are doing that too, limp call. So we are off to a flop, which is 7-8 deuce with 2 hearts. I don't have a heart, but not the worst board for us. So we're still going to see bet this board. We bet out for $16, and he decides to call. The turn is a 5, offsuit 5, and at this point, I think he hit the board decently well, but I'm going to check to get some information because he hasn't been splashy at all. So I checked to him, and he puts out a bet of $25. So if he's betting out for $25, I know he's not doing that with a draw. So I know he has me beat in some way. Could I maybe go for a raise sometimes? But I just don't think this board is the one I want to do it on. So I just surrender my hand. You got to know when to fold them as the song goes. And we move on. Okay, now we have ace 5 offsuit in the big blind. We check our option and we're off to a flop. We missed the board completely. Somebody decides to put out a bet and we fold. Interesting hand here. We have pocket jacks. We raise under the gun to 15. The next to act player calls and the player behind him decides to raise it up to $45, which is a pretty small raise considering the dead money. So when it gets to the small blind, he decides to call the 45. And when it gets to me, I could be putting a 4-bet here, but at 1-3, these 3 bets, especially from older gentlemen, just tend to be the nuts. So I just decide to flat the $45. And in my mind, I'm either going to hit a set or I'm going to end up folding unless maybe I flop a straight draw. But anyways, we are going 4 ways because even the next act player decides to call the 45, getting your price. The flop is 10-10-7, and I check, and when it gets to the 3-better, he bets out for $75. So he doesn't even care that there's 3 other players and there's 2 10s on the board. So that lets me know he does not have ace-king. And now the small blind player decides to call, so that makes my decision even easier. And I fold and the player behind me folds. So they're just going heads up to the turn. And by the river, the small blind player had trip 10s and the 3-better had pocket kings. So if I would have put in a 4-bet, I'm just going to get wrecked. So that was my live read. In some other games, if I was playing 5-10 perhaps, and I know players are 3-betting lighter, then I definitely would be putting in a 4-bet, especially with a small blind flat. But in this case, exploitatively, I just decided to call, only looking to hit a set. I didn't hit no set, no bet. We're out of there. So as we're trying to recover from that hand, we see ace 10 offsuit, pretty decent hand. So we're in the hijack and we raise it up to $15. We get 2 middle position callers and we are off to the flop, which is queen jack 3 rainbow. So when it gets to me, being that there's $45 in the pot, I go slightly under half. I go for 20, and one of the middle position player decides to call, the other folds. So now we're going heads up to a turn, which is the deuce of diamonds. So now I decide to put out a bet of $50. This is 1-3, so I'm not trying to get a player off of a queen. I'm not trying to get them off of king, queen, queen 10. These are hands that they're just not folding, so I'd rather just have the hand. So when I put out a bet of 50, this is trying to get him off of king jack, jack 10, hands of that nature. However, he decides to put in the call. The river is a 3, and he decides to lead out for $55. I mean, obviously, I have no showdown value. I was looking to hit a king for a straight, didn't hit it, and now he's leading the river. That's pretty strong. I could go for a raise all in, but being that I only got 150 back, I don't know if it'll work. This player's been pretty sticky, so I just give up my hand and we lose this one. So I think maybe I'm a little tilted because we're in middle position and we raise king 7 suited and we get a call from the cutoff, the big blind. So we're going 3 ways and we are out of position to a 10-7 deuce board, which is actually not that bad. We do have second pair, best kicker more than likely. And so with that being said, if somebody has a 10, I'll find out shortly. When one person checks to me, I decide to bet $20 because I still would be betting if I had over pairs and stuff like that. So to keep it balanced, I'm going to be betting with middle pair here. And when I put out the bet of 20, to my surprise, they both call. Being that there's no draws out there besides 8-9 straight draw, I'm putting somebody on a top pair type of hand. So with that being said, I'm already going to be very cautious. So we are on our way to the turn, which is a deuce. When it gets to me, I check, and now the cutoff decides to put out a bet of $45. And once again, the small blind calls. So at this point, I know that I'm beat. So I fold, and this is getting kind of frustrating. I'm pretty much losing all the pots I get into. But we got to keep on battling. Let's go. We get dealt a beautiful Queen Jack suited. We raise it up to $15, but unfortunately, everybody folds. All right, ain't nothing like a premium hand to get you back in the game. We have Ace King under the gun. We raise it up to $15. Middle position player decides to put in the call. So we're just hoping to see a good flop, and a good flop we see. It is King 9 deuce with 2 diamonds. So hopefully he has some type of draw or he has a top pair and I'll be able to cooler him. However, I bet out for $15 and he folds. So I wish I could have won more, but we won a pot. So can't be mad, especially after losing several in a row. They say deuces never loses. We're about to see. With pocket deuces in the small blind, I call $5 more to complete the $6 straddle. We're going 5 ways to the flop. No set, no bet. And it looks like we hit it. Jack 4-3. I was looking at the pips, but unfortunately, a 3 is not a deuce. There's 2 spades on the board. It checks to the button. He bets 16. Maybe with some straight draws, I might decide to call. However, I have 2 twos in my hand. Neither one of them are a spade, so I could hit my set, but then it would be a spade, and that would be terrible. Or any straightening cards could start bringing in the flush draw. So I just give it up, and deuces do lose, I guess. We have pocket fours, the sailboats in middle position. I just decided to open limp, and the cutoff raises to 12. Being that that's such a good price, of course I'm going to call when the big blind calls as well. So we are off to a flop, which is ace 6-5 with 2 hearts. And once again, no set, no bet. When the pre-pot raiser decides to c-bet, I quickly just fold. We get out of there. So this is one of the few hands where I feel like I made a misstep. We have Queen 9 in the big blind, suited of course. Under the gun raises to 10, and the small blind decides to call. And being that this guy's been pretty active and now he's just raising so small, I definitely could be putting in a 3-bet here, clean up some of the equity. However, I just decide to call, and we are off to the flop, which is Jack 10-6 with 1 heart. So we are actually open-ended. Any 8 or any king will give us a straight, and we could also hit backdoor hearts. But now, weirdly enough, the small blind player decides to lead out for $15. And I think that him leading, I should be raising this because that doesn't show very much strength. And of course, I decided to be passive in this situation, and I decided to call. Want to know what the pre-flop raiser decides to do, and of course, he decides to call. So now we are going to the turn, which is an offsuit 4, and now the small blind player decides to check, and I think this is where I could take up the betting lead. I think if the pre-flop raiser had a really strong hand, he might have considered raising, but he just quickly called. So with that being said, when I check it, we check to a river, which is now a board pairing 4. So now when it gets to the small blind, he bets out for 30, and I'm done with the hand because I don't think that bluffing here is going to make much sense. So I fold, and it gets around to the +1, and the +1 actually wins with ace 10 for a second pair top kicker. The other player showed pocket 6s. So I think we messed that one up. You can let me know in the comments if I should have played it a little bit more aggressively, but What can I do? I'm showing y'all every hand that I played, not the good and not just the bad, everything. Now we are at a fun hand, one of the funnest ones of the session. We have pocket eights in middle position. We raise it to 20 over a limp. Everyone folds but the limper, of course. And we're going heads up to a flop, which is 8-7-3 with 2 diamonds. So with pocket eights still remaining in overpair. So when he checks to me, I put out a bet of $20, half pot. Could be going larger because there are some draws, pair hands that he could have, being that he limped and called raise. However, that's the price we decide on, and we're off to the turn, which is not really that good. It is a 5, bringing in a lot of 2 pair hands. Also, any 4 now makes a straight. But he leads out for a very small price of 20. I just decide to call. I don't want to raise here and overplay my hand in case he does have one of those hands that has me beat. So I just call, and the river is a board paying 3. It's a good card because now his small 2 pairs are counterfeited, but the flush does get there, and of course he still could have that straight. But when he bets 30 into a pot of 120, that's only a 25% bet. So I know that's not that strong, and you could say just take your showdown value. However, on this particular hand, for whatever reason, I decide that jamming is the best option. So I go all in for 155, a pot-sized jam, and he tanks for so long that I don't even know what I want him to do, because maybe he has a 4 thinking that I hit the obvious flush. So I really don't know what I want him to do, but he tanks for so long. I'm going to speed up how long he tanks for over a minute. But finally, he decides to fold pocket tens face up with a diamond. I didn't know what I wanted, but of course I wanted him to fold that now that I know what it was. You let me know if you think that I should just took my showdown value. Was that a punt? Or do you like my jam, realizing that his hand's not overly strong and that jamming got him off a better hand? You let me know in the comments. I like that hand. I had a lot of fun. He told me not to call him a loser. I'm not going to call him a loser, but we did win the pot, so he is the loser of this pot. So anyways, on to the next hand. Quick break from the felt. Just want to say, if anybody wants to play online poker, just shoot me a message through Discord, Telegram, or text message. Everything's in the description. We're running games pretty much every single day. Everybody's invited. If you're interested, just let me know. We'll get you into the game. You might even get a first time add-on bonus. And if you stack me, might be another prize for that. So anyways, see y'all in Electronic Fault or when I see y'all at MGM. But that's where we're going right back to. Next hand, not so much action. We have ace-jack suited. We raise to 20 from the small blind, and everybody folds. So for the second time of the session, we get king 10 suited and decide to raise it up to 15 from middle position. The hijack and the big blind call. So we are going out of position to a flop of 9-8-3. So there's sometimes I would bet this board and other times I will check out of position. This time I decided to check out of position, see what the field wants to do, and it checks all the way through. The turn is a jack, now giving us open-ended. Any queen or any 7 gives us a straight. However, it could also improve our opponent. So when it checks to me, I decide to check as well, and it checks through again. The river is a 10, giving us a pair. However, any 7 or any queen makes a straight. So when our opponent bets out for 30, I decide to just give up my hand. I don't think I have enough hand here to call. And when I fold, the middle position player calls with a7. He has the bottom end of the straight, and he is good. The other opponent flopped 2 pair with 9-8. So we were behind the whole way through. So glad we actually sussed it out that time and didn't lose any more money than we needed to. We look down at a6 suited. Pretty nice hand. We raised it up to $15. However, we get no action. So that one was a quick one. Moving along, we are looking at the new school GTO hand, ace-5 suited, spade variety on the button. There's a raise to $15, and in 2-5 and in 5-10, definitely would be putting a 3-bet at a greater frequency. However, at 1-3, this guy hasn't been splashing around, so I just call. Under the gun decides to call as well, and we're going to a flop, which is 6-6-8, and it checks all the way around. The turn is a 10. Could be putting a bet, try to see if I can bluff, but I just check and it checks all the way around. And now the river is a 10, so it is double paired, and now it checks around once more. And we chop with ace king, so we were way behind. We put in a 3-bet. We probably would have won though, because he would have just called, and we probably could have won this one, but still, I don't like to get my hands in versus stronger ranges. So anyways, moving along, no damage done. We win a few dollars from the other opponent that called. So in this hand, we're going to go over my biggest misstep of the session. We have pocket queens in the big blind. There's 3 limps.
So when it gets to me, I'm going to raise large here. I don't want to go four ways to the flop. So I raise it up to 30, which is a big boy raise, and everyone who limped decides to call. We are off to a flop, which is very unfortunate because I see an ace in the window, but it's followed by another one, ace, ace, eight. So you don't want to see an ace when you have pocket queens, but two is better than one, lowering the odds of somebody having trips. But being this multi-way, I still decide to check, and it actually checks all the way around. And the turn card is actually about as bad as it could get. It is an 8, so now the board is double paired. And somebody could still have an ace, which is slow playing. Somebody could have an 8 and made a bottom full house. And I don't know why. I think my hand has showdown and wants to get the showdown. But I bet out for 50 for absolutely no reason, and two people decide to call. So when that happens, I'm absolutely done with this hand. Don't know why I put that much money in with this. But just in case you're wondering, the river is a brick, and when I check, the player next to the act decides to bet out for $65. He gets called by the player behind him who had Jack 8 for bottom full house, and the player who opened limped and then just called my $30 raise. He had Ace King, so that was amazing. I don't know why I bet that turn, but it is what it is. We got to shake back, move on to the next hand. Next hand, we get a premium. We get pocket tens, one of my favorite pocket pairs. We raise it to 15 from the small blind. The under the gun lipper decides to call. We're off to a flop, which is Jack 7 deuce, and I'm checking simply to induce. Even with the overcard, if he bets, I'm just going to go all in. But he checks it back, and the turn is an ace. So now I'm deciding to put out a bet of $15 because that's what I would do with my range, and he quickly folds. We wake up with a pretty decent hand of King Queen, and we decide to raise it up to $15. And the same player from last hand who limped decides to three bet me to $35. So already alarm bells are going off. However, with that price, 15 to 35, I have no choice but to call, even though I'm out of position. So we're going heads up to the flop, which is Jack Jack 10. So we are open ended. I'm hoping he doesn't have pocket jacks for quads or pocket tens for a boat, because if so, I'm drawing dead. But once again, we're open ended. So when I check, he puts out a bet of 30. Obviously, to that price, there's no way I'm going to put in a fold. So we call, and the turn is an ace, now giving us a straight. However, he did three bet pre, so he could possibly have pocket aces for a boat, quad jacks, pocket tens, all of the boats still there. So I'm not going to lead out, which I would do in other circumstances. We just check, and he actually checks back, which actually makes me more scared because I feel like he should be betting his range here a lot. He's the three better, but when he checks back, we are off to a river, which is a complete brick. And once again, you would think I would bet here having the straight, but I just decided to check, and he puts out a bet of $60. So I'm getting a great price considering my hand strength. I'm never going to raise here because he's not going to do this with pocket kings. Every once in a while, he could have a random jack, but in my mind, I feel like I'm either way ahead or way behind. So when I put in the call, I tell him, hey, if you don't have a boat, you lose. So he actually flips over his hand. It's one ace, and I'm like, oh, I guess I can beat that. But then he slides the card over, and it's two aces. Pocket aces for aces full. So what a turn card. But I think considering what happened, we lost the minimum. Could have been a lot worse if I would have led the river. But that is what it is. It sucks, but that's poker. Here we go with Ace Jack suited. Under the gun raise to 15. It folds to me, and I look at his stack. It looks like he has like $50 left. So I'm just gonna go all in. I go all in. Now we're going heads up. I tell him I don't have a great hand, but good hand. He shows King 10 offsuit. Ace Jack suit is ahead, but he still has a lot of equity. However, we see an ace on the flop. On the turn, he's dead, and we win. So definitely feels good to win a pot, but we got a long way to go. Once again, we have pocket eights, but this hand's not the same. We're on the button. Middle position raises to 10. I just call. He seems like an OMC, and we're off to a flop, which is ace 9-4. He bets out for $12. That's enough to get me out of there. We fold. No set, no bet. So for the first time this session, we decide to straddle. We get 8-7 offsuit. Everyone folds except for the big blind. He calls the $6, so I just check my option, and we are off to a flop, which is ace queen 8. And when he checks, I decide I have a pair. It's pretty good. So I bet off for $10, and he folds. Nice. I'm in the big blind with Queen Jack offsuit. There's a straddle. There's a bunch of people who call. So I decided to call, see what happens on the flop. And we're going five ways to the flop of 7-8-5 with two spades. It checks to the button. He bets $15. I have some overs and some stuff, but I'm just going to get out of there because the spade's there. Somebody hit spades when I hit an over card. It's going to suck. So we're out of there. We lose. And for the final hand of the session, we are under the gun with the jiggities. We raise it up to $15 and the cutoff, small blind and big blind call. You don't even want to go four ways with aces that often, so definitely not with jacks. But we actually see one of the best flops that we could ask for. It is 9-7-3, so we have an overpair. There's two spades on the board. We do have the jack of spades. So being as that it went four ways, there's 16 of pot. I just go half pot for a 30, thinking that somebody could call with a top pair, maybe some kind of draw. However, they all fold, and that is going to be the end of the hands. We're going to go to the outro where I give you the realistic expectations of a session and the realistic results. Everything was documented from this session, every hand that I played, but let's go over the results right now. So we're going to go over the results. Wasn't quite what we expected, but that's poker. That's how it goes. Ended up not being too bad at the end, but we were in the game for 400. We left out with 240 to our name. So that is a loss of 160, but in reality, that's really nothing. I played for roughly 4 hours, so lost about $40 an hour, but it's all good. That's how reality of poker is. It's not always highlights, not always glam. A lot of boring stuff, some failed bluffs, stuff like that, but at least I didn't lose more than it could have been. So anyways, appreciate y'all for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. And until the next video, holla.